This shoe is from the Registering Shoes in Clo video. This is what we're going to be constructing here. This will give you some good techniques to build upon. We're going to be working backwards. I'm going to show you the finished shoes and then how we got there. Keep in mind that, like so many techniques in Clo, this is just one way to do this. You may find your own techniques that help you. There's a handful of things that you will do over and over again that will help. Freeze, strengthen, and deactivating patterns with sewing will be used a lot. Turned seams and removing the 3D seam line will be used to create the right connections between the patterns, and then hiding those frozen and deactivated patterns to aid in construction. Start with an avatar in heels, then delete one shoe. This gives you the pose that you need. An avatar with high heels on is different than an avatar whose heel pose is changed to the up position. Note if you remove all shoes and then change the heels to up, that the ball of the foot is flat on the ground. But when you remove a shoe, there is a space between the ball of the foot and the ground. This is what we need for when we apply the shoes to our avatar. Okay, so here is our shoe here. I have one of my shoes built around my avatar, and I still have on my other shoe from the Clo library. Okay, now what I'd like to take notice of what's going on in the pattern here. Now this pattern started out as a normal shoe pattern, and I adjusted it to fit onto my avatar based on the height of the heels and how it worked in terms of stability. Okay, note that these pieces here make up the heel itself, and we will start with building the heel and then build the rest of the shoe around it. The front of my shoe here, you'll notice, has some cuts here, but when I remove the 3D line here, you cannot tell that those lines are in the front of my shoe. Again, I'm going for the visual of it fitting on my avatar. And finally, what I also did was I cut these two pieces, this sole, into two pieces so it would be easier to get to drape in the right shape that I wanted it. This allowed me to freeze half of it and freeze the back half separately. Finally, you'll note these two pieces here. These two pieces are what we call our blank layer or dummy layer. And as you can see over here in our object browser, they have their own fabric, and currently it is set to transparent. These you will work on. This you might remember from the previous video about registering shoes in Clo. These have heels, so there's a worry that when I put these heels onto an avatar and use motion, that the heel might catch on my garment if it is a long dress or a long pair of slacks. Okay? So we're going to go backwards now, and I'm going to hide most parts of the shoe here so that we can see how this shoe is constructed. Okay, so what I have done is I have selected all parts of the shoe except for the heel, and I have deactivated them. They're this purple color, and as you can see that they are selected here in the 2D pattern window. I'm now going to hide these, and I can do this by right-clicking in the 3D window or use Shift-Q hotkeys. So here is my heel. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to freeze all parts of this heel. Okay, and I am now very quickly going to hide these as well. So this is where I start. Let me turn on my grid here. This is where I start with these two pieces. I place one here at the heel, and I place one on the ground. Okay, then the pieces that I then attach here, I then concentrate on and make sure that those pieces match in terms of their visibility or in terms of their size to what I have going on here. I construct these other two pieces after the fact. what I will do is use this measurement tool here to measure the distance between the heel that's on the floor and the heel that's placed under the heel of the foot. In this case, I've got a measurement there of about 3 3/4 inches. This gives me some idea of the size of the piece that needs to go in here, and then of course the size that this needs to be around here we can use to measure these pieces as well. Okay, so as you can see, when you click here, you've got a measurement of 2.18. That is this measurement around the outside here, and then it is longer at the bottom. So then I take all of these measurements and I construct these pieces here to make up the heel. Okay, while the pieces are frozen, the two pieces for the top and the bottom are frozen. I will put the inside of the sole in first and simulate it. So these two pieces would still be frozen, and this piece I would still have deactivated. And then if I use strengthen here, this will help give me a stiffness. If I simulate this here, this makes this a very nice straight piece. And then I will do the same thing with the back piece to create the shape of the heel. From this point forward, once I have this shape of the heel in place, this is going to stay frozen, okay? Because I'm going to build everything here from here on out. Now, these pattern pieces are adjusted from an actual shoe pattern so that they will drape correctly around this particular foot. The foot is a tad bit distorted, but once the shoe is on there, we will be able to see what's going on. Okay? If we then start to bring back pieces here, there is the sole. Okay? I would then activate this and strengthen it. I would sew this in place first up here and simulate to see that it falls down. Here I would then make some adjustments to the length based on the shape of the shoe that I'm creating and the size of the foot. Sometimes I will go underneath here and change my pattern pieces to transparent to make sure that these pieces fit correctly around my shoe. Once these pieces are in place, I am going to freeze these. These pieces here, have an internal line here, and this is where I sew the upper part of the shoe too, so that the edge sticks out a little bit as it would on an actual shoe. Okay, these two pieces are mirrored, are symmetrical. It works out as such so that I can get these pieces to come together. Okay. Basically, the first thing I would do is get them into place and then edit the shape of the pattern, keeping them as simple as possible. As you can see, there's a limited number of segment points, and if I turn on my edit curve point tool, there's a limited number of curve points as well, so that I can easily modify this shape. So when I then bring these back, okay, there is my sides of my upper here, and then this is the toe section here. And as you can see, there are the sewn parts to create the shape. I do this as I go. I don't always know exactly how this shape is going to look. Once I get these pieces in place, it then allows me to edit the pattern in the 2D window so that I can get the correct shape. This shape that goes over the toe, honestly, is a little bit odd looking, okay? But it works when it's sewed in place in terms of how it is laying on the foot and wrapping around the toes. This is also a place here on the side where I removed the 3D sewing option here. So if we collect this here Actually, mine is still there. So here I will actually remove that. I'll just click the normal map and remove that. And I checked that there as well. I should have removed those, but that's a good way for you to see how to do that. So then this seam now is perfectly smooth. These two also should also be removed. Interesting. That will ensure that there is no 3D seam there on the toe or on the sides where these pieces connect. Okay, if I then activate these then come back. I can work with these textures here to change the scale of them, to change the bias or the rotation, just like you would a regular pattern piece. What I also do here, and depending upon the shoe and the style, I will use my measurement tool, my basic tape measure, and create lines here on the heel and attach the top of my shoe here to the line on the heel to give this a correct shape. Sometimes it sags if you have an extreme heel here. Sometimes it sags and goes over the edge. Okay. While you are building this, the fabric that you are using for the shoes should be something that has some stiffness to it. If you look at my fabrics here, I have renamed them. The material type is leather, but down here the preset is full grain leather. Okay, this has a lot of stiffness to it. The shoes themselves are already probably made out of full grain leather, and this will provide you with the ability to get things to stand up correctly. These sewing lines here that are connecting the sole to the upper, you will notice have a turned sewing line type there. Okay, so where all these connect all the way around, we have a turned seam so that this piece sews down onto the sole as opposed to wanting to roll out. If you would like, you could also create an insole of your shoe if you wanted to have a shoe that for display, or if you wanted to be able to see on the inside, if you want to put your logo or name in there so that they could, so that someone could see the designer. And as you can also see, I have added top stitch around my shoe and on the back. And this top stitch, I have brought in the single heavy top stitch from the Clo library, which has the, in the hardware and trims, this is an option here, single heavy, so that you can really see the size of the stitch. These pieces here, which are the blank pieces, these are put in after the fact as well. I get the entire shape of the shoe together, and then I create those pieces to be the dummy pieces or the blank pieces. And all I do is I just put a normal piece of fabric in there. Again, I use the trim full grain leather because it has some stiffness, and then I turn off the opacity here. And then I would also need to activate them as well. So that in theory your shoe is going to look like this when you import it into Blender to help you then register the shoes. Now, as you can also see, these pieces are set up very nicely here, because what you're going to need to do to register them is you're going to have to check the UV map. So you be mindful of how your pieces are coming together here. The step for registering them to register them as shoes, you will need to have the UV map set up, and that is explained in the previous video if you haven't seen that already. In terms of the actual shape, there is a fair amount of editing and tweaking and moving points to get the correct shape. It takes some time. I can't say that it's easy, but I have found that these steps have allowed me to have some success with creating shoes that can be registered. You can also use things like when I select this sole here, you will notice it's very thick. If I select these pieces here as the sole and I check my simulation properties, the additional thickness rendering is a 3. This will add a visual thickness to our pattern pieces, and this will also this will also give us the opportunity to add the curved side geometry how we would want it so that the edge of this shoe has the shape that we want. You can also select these shapes in here, and you will be able to change these numbers to be a smaller amount so that if you find that when these pieces are coming together when they're sewn, if there's some issues with how they actually appear, that will help when those two pieces come together. And of course, again, this should be a situation where again, my 3D seam line can be removed so that there is no issue with where those come together. I believe that that is the entire set of techniques to create these shoes. Once you've done this in Clo, you can go on to the other video for registering them so that you can put them on your avatar. Now that we've reviewed a few basic techniques for our high heel shoe, let's look at this flat shoe. This was also in a video previously about registering flat shoes, and the basic concept is the same. As you can see, my avatar's foot has a space underneath. Here is the one pattern for this shoe, which includes all the parts of the shoe itself and also the blank layer surrounding the shoe, so that if he wore pants, the parts would not get caught inside any part of the shoe itself. We work in the same manner here, a lot of freezing and strengthening to help these pieces all stay in place. So these pieces that I've selected here and frozen were frozen for a large portion of the time. I can simulate this here now, and this will simulate fine because these are the main parts holding them all together. I'm going to bring back the other shoe, and it's here now on in my 2D window, and I'm going to freeze those same parts as well. So now here, if I simulate, this is now simulating. We've got a couple things moving. The laces are a little bit tricky. So this is a case of where you can strengthen these laces if necessary and or freeze them once they are in the right position. The laces themselves do not actually tie. They go to the holes here, and underneath each of these pieces of the shoe there is a piece here that these are sewn to. As you can see here in my 2D window, there is an internal line here, and each of these portions, each of these ends of these laces are sewn here, and those sewn areas are then in the 3D window. You can see underneath here, there is our piece that these are sewn to, and you can see here, if I turn on my internal lines, there are my marks where those are sewn to. All of these are just internal lines with stitching sewn there. I added a layer to the tongue of the shoe so that I could then add pressure so that these pieces would appear a little puffy. Okay. I added a graphic stripe onto the toe. If If I unfreeze this here, we'll be able to see that. There's the graphic stripe. I also added a graphic stripe to this tag on the tongue. And I also added this detail on the back with this loop and also the graphic stripe. But again, all the basic techniques are there. I started with a basic shoe sneaker pattern and just adjusted it as I went along. This shoe also has a part on the inside of here to help me with some stability on the back of my sneaker, which is sewn in here along that seam. And I used the binding tool here to give me this detail here around the ankle. More than anything, when creating shoes, it takes patience and practice. You'll do a lot of detail editing and designing as you go. As long as you use the tips that you learned here, you should be successful in being able to create and then register shoes in Clo. Good luck.